楽しい
This is a video that I've been waiting to make for such a long time, so I'm happy that I can finally motivate myself to drop this video for you guys. And in case you can't read the title of this video, this is a character analysis of the 5th rank level 5 Esper, Shokuhou Misaki. Shokuhou has always been a controversial character ever since her debut in the Railgun manga, or her anime debut in Railgun S. This is because of the way she antagonizes Misaka Makoto in this now famous scene where she demonstrates her power to control the minds of others. And it seems the Railgun producers liked this scene so much that they pretty much produced a carbon copy of it in the first episode of Railgun T to remind you of who Shokuhou was. With Makoto's popularity as one of the most popular light novel heroines of all time, and Shokuhou acting as a rival towards Makoto, things were always going to get heated from certain parts of the fandom. In contrast, other fans loved Shokuhou for her physical appearance, which prompted her to be drawn by many doujinshi artists despite her lack of screen time in the anime, which is pretty impressive all things considered. However, because of this, the fans who didn't like Shokuhou criticised her for being some cum dumpster and failed to see why anyone would like her for reasons that didn't involve hentai. Things changed due to her role in the Daiheseizai arc in the Railgun manga and her appearances in the Index light novel, where she became a complex character with some of the most interesting morals in the entire series. Most light novel readers started to recognise her as one of the best female characters in the series, and it was usually a battle between Shokuhou, Makoto, and Ophinus for who deserved the prestigious title of Best Girl amongst the fandom. Despite her resurgence in popularity, it didn't stop the Shokuhou haters from crawling out their basements on Twitter and Discord from saying Shokuhou is one of the worst characters in the series. But why is this? Because of her appearance again? Not quite. From my understanding, it is in regard to her decision making or aspects of her personality rather than her complete character, as they like to zone in on one or two examples and then hate the character based off those two things without even trying to understand why she acts that way to begin with. If you haven't read the light novels of Index, this might sound confusing to you, so I apologise, and also don't worry, I'm splitting this video into two parts after this segment: her character from Railgun T and her character from New Testament, so you will still be able to watch the first half of the video if you have only seen the anime or read the Railgun manga. Anyway, back to the point. I want to use an example of Shinji Ikari from Neon Genesis Evangelion as a comparison to Shokuhou. And this might seem really strange and weird, like, Aeon, what the hell? These characters are totally different and from different franchises, so why are you comparing them? And I know, they are pretty different. I mean, they do have some similarities. I mean, they both have some sort of mental issue and problems with attachment, but that's not the point I'm going to be making. I think Shinji is a very well written character due to his character development, where he further longs for some form of attachment and affection from those around him, and what happens when that is taken away from him. His personality and the relationships he has with Gendo, Misato, Asuka, Kaworu, etc. all flesh him out and give his character multi-dimensions. You'd think that a character with such a deep personality would be universally loved, right? Ha 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 ha, nope. It didn't stop people from calling Shinji a terrible protagonist and character. Okay, I can kinda sympathize with that point from like the first two Rebuild movies, where his character is rushed in my opinion, but certainly not for the original Neon Genesis Evangelion. Fans who don't like Shinji call him terrible because he is a coward. He is not confident or mentally strong, and he is easily manipulated by others, and has daddy issues and has frequent panic attacks, amongst other things. But this doesn't necessarily mean that Shinji is a badly written character. If Shinji was confident, strong-willed, and a complete Giga Chad, he would lose everything about what makes him interesting and would not be as complex as a character. He would be a generic hero character instead, and that would kind of sacrifice the psychological theme of Evangelion, at least from Shinji's point of view. These fans that criticize Shinji look at the surface level of Shinji's character, or not even the character itself, just what he displays on the surface, without asking why, or looking deeper into what defines him as a person. And I think the same can be applied to Shokuhou. Her critics judge her for her personality and decision making without even attempting to look deeper and considering why she makes these decisions, and how that makes her a far more interesting character than if she did not make those decisions. So, if you are a notable critic of Shokuhou, I highly encourage you to wait till the end of this video before commenting. I doubt I will be able to change a lot of people's minds. All I ask is that I be listened to. Anyway, that was a long ass intro, so I apologise. Let's get started. As I previously mentioned, Shokuhou is first introduced in a cameo scene in Railgun where she taunts Misaki with her ability. The main thing I love about this scene is that we, the audience, start to judge Shokuhou as a person from this scene, as this is the first time we have seen her character. She has the persona of the Queen of Tokiwadai. She claims to basically control a school because she has the largest clique. So she comes across to both the audience and Misaki as quite controlling and arrogant. But we later learn in the arc that this is more of a front that she uses to hide her true vulnerabilities inside. So while she appears as this dominant and perhaps sly, manipulative figure in Tokiwadai School, and that's how rival clique members perceive her, she is more vulnerable and actually a good person inside. But not many people know that because not many people truly get close to Shokuhou apart from few members of her clique. I believe this intentionally introduces her as a manipulative and sly character so that the twist later in the Daisei arc has more punch, as during that arc, a Misaki clone is mysteriously kidnapped and Makoto attempts to investigate what happened. All clues lead to Shokuhou Misaki, who orders her clique not to let Misaki escape from them, and the fact that Shokuhou erased the memories of Kuroko, Saten, and Ueharu had of Misaki, doing that made most readers believe at the time that Shokuhou was the villain of this arc, orchestrating these events to gain some sort of advantage or end goal. But as it was later revealed when Misaki met again with Shokuhou, Shokuhou was not the villain and was working behind the scenes to try and foil the plot of Kihara Gensei and Kozaki Mitori. And due to her willingness not to rely on others or endanger them, she purposely tried to keep Misaki away. Misaki was also the one Esper she could not control, making her unpredictable and making Shokuhou anxious that Misaki's involvement would make things worse and spring Gensei's trap. So while Shokuhou did something that can be considered as horrible by removing the memories of Misaki's close friends, she did it with good intentions and was due to the stubborn personality of not wanting to endanger others and not trusting those who are out of her control. But yeah, at the end of the arc she did restore their memories. Shokuhou is further fleshed out as a character during the Daihasei arc, and her decision to act independently is given much needed context in the story thanks to her backstory with Dolly. As Misaki gave away her DNA map as a child, it allowed Dolly to be cloned, who was then used as a guinea pig by researchers at the lab known as Ideal, where Shokuhou befriended Dolly. Shokuhou was prompted to use mental out on Dolly by the scientists to make Dolly believe Shokuhou was Mitori, Dolly's friend who had disappeared. Shokuhou basically pretended to be Mitori, began to be friends with Dolly herself, but started to dislike pretending to be another person to trick Dolly, and sadly Dolly eventually passed away from her illness that she had. This caused Shokuhou to riot against the researchers at the Ideal Lab and take control of the facility for herself. And I think this backstory of Shokuhou is a great anecdote that explores the core of her character, that continues to define her in whatever spin-off or volume she appears in. The dichotomy of order and chaos, being in control and having no control. Shokuhou's power allows her to control anyone with some exceptions, and it's a power she frequently uses for her own advantage. While she can certainly be perceived as a manipulative character who only cares about herself due to the stigma attached with her power, this doesn't necessarily tell the full story of who Shokuhou is as a person and why she controls others. Due to the clone dolly incident, Shokuhou prefers to be in control of those around her, as she was manipulated by the scientists to proceed with the experimentation on Dolly and not oppose it before it was too late. The researchers all wore helmets that blocked Shokuhou's ability, so she was never in control of the situation. She did later find a way to eventually bypass the helmets after Dolly's death though, and when she used her power in a way that she thought benefited Dolly, she actually made things worse by creating a fake relationship between them. And this encapsulates the struggle of Shokuhou and her power, which has become part of her very identity. She is aware of the moral implications of controlling someone's mind, which is why she feels entirely responsible if something bad happens to them. She has a desire for real human relationships that are not fake, which is why part of her dislikes the fact that she can manipulate nearly anyone to her will. In contrast, because she has the power and due to the tragedy she experienced at such a young age, she finds it difficult to trust those around her. She changes somewhat after this arc, but I'll get to that later. This has been almost a psychological barrier for Shokuhou, who is paranoid about being in control of situations. With her power, it gives her an easy method to be in control, as she always fears something could go wrong if she doesn't have an easy way to control those around her with mental out. Therefore, mental out can be seen as both a blessing and a curse for Shokuhou. Her dynamic with Misaka during this arc is interesting, as Shokuhou does not trust Misaka because she is out of her field of control, and because Shokuhou views Misaka as gullible, how Shokuhou used to be herself. Shokuhou concedes to them working together, as Misaka has already gotten too involved in her and Gensei's plans to ignore. While it may seem that Shokuhou hates Misaka, it is not entirely true. Blaming Misaka for handing her DNA map to the researchers seems unreasonable, as Misaka was so young when that happened, but Shokuhou herself relates to that in a way that she blames herself for not intervening with Dolly earlier. So in a way, she wants Misaka to feel part of the blame too, as Shokuhou cannot control Misaka, and Shokuhou feels her relationship with Misaka will always be genuine and does not worry about going overboard and mental out, while she has that dynamic with members of her clique. Even if she is not necessarily on friendly terms with Misaka, she feels that she understands Misaka more than most people in Academy City. That's because Shokuhou herself made a naive decision when she was young, just like Misaka did. Of course, Shokuhou doesn't understand the complete trauma that Misaka went through during the Sisters arc, but it's just from Shokuhou's perspective. How is she meant to know that? She is just viewing it from her angle, but we the audience know far more about what happened. Due to Shokuhou's desire to be in control, and knowing Misaka's hot-blooded and aggressive nature, especially concerning something related to the sisters, Shokuhou thought it would be best to exclude her from the situation. By peering into the heads of others, Shokuhou knows whether to trust someone or not. She could not do this with the researchers, nor with Misaka, which makes it harder for her to cooperate. But as they work together, and things are clearly not under control, Shokuhou would have definitely failed without the help of others that were not under her influence. Shokuhou defeated Gensei on her own, but Kuroko, Gunha, and Toma all played their roles in stopping the Level 6 Shift project and saving Academy City. Without their involvement, Shokuhou would have not been able to win. I think this moment acts as character development for Shokuhou, where she is more willing to cooperate with others rather than relying on her own plan in her future appearances in the series. At the end of the arc, Shokuhou frees Motoi and they meet another version of Dolly, with the original Dolly's memories being transferred to this new body. I love this scene as it says so much about Shokuhou as a character. When Dolly exits her medical tube, Mitori rushes to Dolly full of emotion at seeing her friend alive, while Shokuhou stays back emotionless, and as Dolly and Mitori are reunited and embrace each other, Shokuhou walks away. This is for two reasons. This is partially because Shokuhou expects that Dolly will no longer recognize her because of Shokuhou manipulating Dolly's mind into believing that she is Mitori in the past. Therefore, she believed that Dolly would no longer recognize her or simply see her as another Mitori. The second reason is that she feels guilty for what happened. She doesn't believe she deserves to be reunited with her friend because she did not save her and created a false bond between them. Therefore, she is willing to abandon it and let Mitori take her place in Dolly's heart. Shokuhou has matured since the events of her past and understands she cannot have normal human relationships with others. Therefore, she is willing to cast aside her feelings towards her loved ones so that they can be happy and experience genuine human relations with others. Like this simple action of turning away says so much about Shokuhou's character, and people who say Shokuhou is a heartless bitch really needs to watch this scene again. Like seriously, how can you honestly believe a character is so bad? That's what I'm referring to earlier about these fans putting zero effort to actually understand this character. It's almost the same as the people who hate Index for stupid head-biting gags rather than actually finding innate problems with her purpose in the story and her character. Anyway, Dolly notices Shokuhou and recognizes Shokuhou for who she is. Shokuhou then breaks down emotionally and apologizes for what she did to Dolly and not saving her. Shokuhou wanted to reunite Dolly with Mitori back in the past so that Dolly could have her friend back, but Shokuhou ended up creating herself a false identity and lied to Dolly. Reuniting Dolly with Mitori in the present was her way of correcting the mistake of the past. However, Dolly forgives Shokuhou as Dolly understands Shokuhou's actions and simply wishes to be with her two friends and enjoy life with them. It's a beautiful end to the arc and shows that Shokuhou now is no longer burdened by her past with Dolly. She has matured and, most importantly, regained a genuine human relationship when her relationship with Dolly was just a facade. Now, this is the part of the video where I'll be talking about New Testament, so if you haven't read the light novel and don't want to be spoiled, this is where you click off the video. In 3, 2, 1. So, in New Testament, we learn much more about Shokuhou and another part of her past, and most importantly, explains her relationship with Kamijo Toma. Shokuhou and Toma always acted kinda weird in their interactions in Railgun and New Testament 7. Something didn't add up due to how strange their reactions were, as Shokuhou would act differently with Toma around, or say some weird shit like, "You're my prince!" Like, why the fuck is she even saying that? And as for Toma, he acts like Railgun never happened and has just met Shokuhou again for the first time. This was an intriguing mystery in the franchise, and Kamachi decided to reveal all the answers to this mystery in New Testament 11, the volume after the Ophinus arc. Kamachi himself stated in the afterword that he wanted to reveal this second backstory of Shokuhou, but didn't know when or where he would do it. But after the climax of the Ophinus arc, he decided now was the time, and honestly, I think it was a great decision to make. Sure, he could have put this in Railgun instead of Index, but then I feel the story would become more about Toma and Shokuhou rather than about Misaki, which kinda defeats the point of having Misaki as the protagonist in Railgun. So it was better suited in Index or Shokuhou's own spin-off. But that has only just been released this year. So I know the Ophinus arc is one of the best arcs in the franchise, but it has a problem. Whoa, don't kill me. Listen, I love the Office arc, but one of the problems is that it almost feels like a finale arc on the scale of World War III, except it's not. In fact, it's just before the halfway point of New Testament, which is crazy to think about. Why is this a problem? Because when you have such a climactic arc with tons of build-up, not even at the middle point of the story, then you have to start that build-up from the very beginning, which is why Kamachi became more experimental with his ideas and storytelling after the Office arc, because he literally finished his main plotline built up from the beginning of New Testament. And honestly, I think this was a good decision to have New Testament 11 afterwards and start experimenting with new ideas, because, well, I'm not a fan of all of his ideas in these volumes, like in the Kamisato arc, like most fans, but I appreciate the fact that he was willing to take risks while also deciding to finish the build-up to the Alistair/Coronzon arc, which had been an unfinished plot point since Old Testament, so that's why I don't mind New Testament 11's place in the story. Sure, Shokuhou is pretty much the main character this volume, instead of Toma, but Old Testament 8 did that with Kuroko, so it wasn't exactly like it was the first time Kamachi has done this in Index. Plus, Toma is way more important in this volume than in Old Testament 8 anyway, if you want to do a direct comparison between them. I still think it was a risky decision to take the focus away from Toma in the present after the Office arc, but honestly I think it paid off. Since the story had climaxed with New Testament 10, it was better to do this story after a blank slate rather than just randomly have it in the middle of a different arc and end up making the story way messier, but that's just my opinion. Like I said, this volume is a backstory volume for the most part, so Shokuhou is basically having flashbacks to her past while also moving in the present. Now, this volume could have been written without much effort. If it was basically, hey, let's just have Shokuhou and trigger a long ass flashback randomly, which has no relevance to what she's currently doing, and then just have the entire story of the volume as a flashback. But that doesn't happen, thank God, because Kamachi isn't Masashi Kishimoto, who loves random out of place flashbacks more than he loves the Uchiha clan and Senju DNA, and once he starts a flashback, he's not ending the goddamn thing until the entire story is done. If you've never watched or read Naruto, you won't understand that reference, but live with it. So yeah, the flashbacks of New Testament 11 are broken up into pieces so that it improves the flow of the arc a lot with breaks in between, and the final or third act of the volume has no flashbacks at all, with the exception of revealing what happened to Toma in Shokuhou and Toma's past, which really coincided nicely with the ending and revealed the mystery to the audience as we were trying to figure out what happened between the two characters, which I really appreciated. And the breaks from the flashbacks are actually Shokuhou going places in the present, relevant to her flashbacks, which triggers them, which makes perfect sense in my opinion, like when you visit a nostalgic place and remember the shit you did there when you were younger. And she is also investigating a mystery directly linked to her past, which is great as the flashbacks are also relevant to the main plot point of the arc, which is Shokuhou's conflict with Mitsuari Ayu. I just wanted to mention why this volume is actually decent writing wise, as it could have been handled a lot worse, but at the end of the day, this is a character analysis and not a volume review, so I better go back on track and talk about Shokuhou herself in this volume. So, it is revealed that Shokuhou knew Toma about 1 or 2 years before the start of Volume 1 of Old Testament. Shokuhou bumped into Toma without them noticing each other, and Toma lost his phone as a result of this exchange. Remember this detail, as it will be important later on. Anyway, this is a few years after Dolly's death, if I remember correctly, but Shokuhou has had enough of the guilt and burden it has inflicted upon her. The only problem with this scene is that it expects you to have read Railgun before to understand why Shokuhou is vulnerable in this moment, otherwise you would probably be confused about what the fuck is up with her. So that context is super important. She wants to basically use mental out on herself to remove her memories of what happened. I can totally understand Shokuhou's motives in a situation, as I'm sure so many people who have experienced a tragedy or a traumatic experience in life wish that they could just forget it and move on in their lives. But just before she's about to do it, Toma talks to her, and the funny thing is, he has no idea what she was about to do because he doesn't know what her Esper power is at this point. And the scene shifts to a more light-hearted tone thanks to his involvement. Shokuhou even tries to use mental out on Toma, so he will leave her the fuck alone, but using mental out on Toma makes him lightheaded, which prompts him to touch his head with Imagine Breaker, negating the effects of mental out. Then we see Shokuhou and Toma having slice of life moments together, and I actually really like the chemistry as they actually have good banter between each other, often making fun of the other person. One example of this good chemistry is also important to the plot, as it's when Shokuhou gets attacked by pigeons and Toma gives her a silver whistle to call him to save her if she's in trouble again. It's intended as a joke, as he's basically poking fun at Shokuhou that because she's level 5 and yet she can't handle a flock of pigeons. There are plenty other great examples of the banter between them, but this is probably the best example while also being relevant to the plot later in the arc. So not only does it further flesh out the relationship and dynamic between Toma and Shokuhou, but it also introduces a plot element of the whistle. Anyway, let's fast forward to where Shokuhou is attacked by the dark side group known as Deadlock. They basically hate level 5s or something and want to beat the shit out of a teenage girl. Just a normal day in Academy City. Toma is also there to help, and Shokuhou and Toma fight Deadlock together, but Toma gets beaten up really bad and has to go to hospital. While he is in the ambulance, Shokuhou panics and decides to use mental out on Toma to try and ease the pain from his wounds, something she has never attempted before on another person. But things go horribly wrong, as Toma's low blood pressure meant that manipulating the fluids in Toma's brain via mental out caused a negative change. Toma basically lost all his memories of Shokuhou and can no longer form new memories of her. It sounds kind of far-fetched how that would result in Toma losing his memories of only Shokuhou, but I guess since it was her power interfering, then it was always going to be linked back to her image in Toma's brain. Anyway, in the present, Mitsuari Ayu and Shokuhou fight, as Ayu is annoyed that Toma saved Shokuhou instead of her, despite him having no idea that Ayu wanted to kill herself, and her under the assumption that Toma would be available 24/7 to answer his phone to come to the rescue. Yep, that's as dumb as it sounds. Shokuhou is about to be beaten, but she blows the whistle that Toma gave her, and Shokuhou was convinced he would show up as Shokuhou's last bit of hope. But who would have thought Toma actually does show up, and Shokuhou roasts Ayu, who is acting like a spoilt brat, that Toma has come again to save Shokuhou, and she basically says, "I've already been saved enough, now you go get his help." Such a badass moment, and a good roast. And by the way, I thought this moment was an ass pull, until it's revealed that Seria said to Toma to go to Ground Geo where they were all at, and then now it does make sense. Shokuhou's contrast with Ayu also makes her a deeper character, as Shokuhou could have ended up like Ayu if Shokuhou already knew Toma like Ayu did when she wanted to commit suicide. But what separates them is that when Shokuhou wanted to erase her memories, she never expected to be saved by anyone. Ayu was completely reliant on Toma and single-handedly blamed him instead of herself, and obsessed over him and Shokuhou for years, wanting revenge. Just like how she obsessed over the fact that she was not chosen to be a level 5, while Shokuhou is kind of the opposite. She's the opposite of Toma, as she failed to save people close to her, while Toma is the one you can always rely on. Well, except for Ayu. and Shokuhou tries to move on from her past, which makes Shokuhou the opposite of Ayu, who does not move on. For example, Shokuhou has said she's fine with Toma being a hero for others. She's aware or has some idea that Misaka and perhaps even Index are close to Toma, and has had to sacrifice her position in Toma's life to others so that they and Toma can be happy. Like, that shows how selfless Shokuhou can be as a person sometimes, and it shows her maturity that she was willing to move on in her life. But due to Toma's actions in this volume, she develops as a character, as she realises that she should not alienate herself from Toma all the time, despite how painful it may be that he still doesn't remember her. As long as she gets to be a part of his life, she will be happy, and she understands this is her selfish wish, that he will one day remember her. It shows that Shokuhou can be selfish, if you can call it that. She sacrifices the self-interest of others instead of her own, in a similar way to Toma, but on the other hand, she also has self-centered dreams and ambitions. You know what this is, folks? This is what you call a multi-dimensional character. Shokuhou feels more like a real person, as she has many layers to her character like real people do, as she is both selfish and selfless in different scenarios and situations. So this volume was honestly great at exploring Shokuhou's character further, and it makes sense how Shokuhou is now more prompted to be involved in trying to help Toma than she was previously. I'm going to skip a lot of the volumes after this point, as Shokuhou plays a pretty much supporting role in these volumes alongside Misaka, and they pretty much work together to help Toma in different situations. There is one thing I want to talk about before New Testament 22R though, where Shokuhou's character arc in New Testament concludes, and that is a common criticism of Shokuhou as of late, and that is Hornisaki. Yep, you heard that right. Basically, some fans are annoyed that Shokuhou keeps flirting with Toma or trying to lose her V-card with him. Why are these people mad at a horny teenager who has a crush? I don't know. Y'all had no problem with Lessar when she was trying that shit in World War III, but suddenly, because it's Shokuhou, now it's a problem and it ruins her character. Come on, I can't believe I have to defend this. Index has always had fan service. If you don't like it, then don't read it. Simple. Moving on. Now on to New Testament 22R, which apart from the first chapter, which was dog shit, it was a great volume overall. But strangely, this is the volume where more people started to dislike Shokuhou over a controversial event in the volume. As in this volume, we are introduced to Kamijo no Toma, or KNT for short. KNT is basically a doppelganger of Toma, who has taken Toma's place at the Windsor Castle celebrations after the defeat of Koronzon. KNT has all of Toma's memories, including the ones that he lost in both Misaki's case and in Index's case, and he basically represents the selfish aspects of Toma. KNT wants to save others to benefit himself and manipulate others to his advantage, and this includes manipulating the Queen of England, Elizard, to serve him and taking over Windsor Castle for himself. But his main objective is to be Kamijo Toma and eliminate the real Toma he believes is a fake, as KNT believes he is in fact what it means to be Kamijo Toma. When the two Tomas appear in the castle, KNT tries to provoke a reaction from Shokuhou by referring to the whistle and that he has all memories in order to manipulate her to his side, so he can use her power to defeat the real Toma. While KNT used unprovoked violence against Toma, which Shokuhou notes is uncharacteristic, she has constantly hanged on to that one string linking her to the miracle she wants more than anything else. Even though she has major doubts, that feeling of her past overcomes her in this moment as she cries and chooses KNT while her mental outability goes berserk. She even manages to take over Misaka after Misaka protects Toma as she knocks him out of the building out of Shokuhou's range. So the reason why this moment is controversial is pretty obvious. Shokuhou betrayed the real Toma when she wasn't even sure which one was real, and having her doubts and making the most selfish decision in this moment. But remember what I said earlier about Shokuhou being selfless for all those years, but having that selfish desire inside her. I'm sure Shokuhou thought that this was her last chance at her miracle, her last hope to get her dream. K&T is almost like the devil in his situation, and perhaps in the entire volume, manipulating those around him and tempting them with what they want, and the worst side of Shokuhou gives in to the devil. K&T brings out the worst in those around him. It's interesting that Shokuhou kinda mirrors the situation with the two Tomas in this moment. She goes from accepting that she will never be with Toma and sacrificing her own self-interest for him and those around him, to then giving into her desire to have the Toma she wants at the expense of those around her. Just like how the original Toma is selfless in his actions, but inside, as exposed in the Alphanus arc, he became more selfish to prioritize his self-interests, and K&T represents the very extreme version of the selfish side of Toma. K&T says to Index he wants to go back home to Academy City with her, but also takes over Windsor Castle for himself when there's no need to. He's willing to trample on others to get what he wants, and only cares about his own goal. Sound familiar? K&T is the dark side of Toma in a way. Therefore, it's hardly surprising it brings out the dark side in Shokuhou. And it's honestly really strange to me that, literally all fans of the series who have read this volume that I've met online or encountered seem to have only kind words for K&T as an antagonist. And yet, they seem to have more problem with Shokuhou than K&T, who pretty much took advantage of this entire thing. I don't know how that works at all, but someone can explain it to me if they can. So honestly, Shokuhou's decision was written really well, as it also showed how much doubt Shokuhou had while making it, and it's totally plausible she chose K&T in this situation. And she continues to feel guilt and doubt her decision as she controlled the minds of 20% of the people in the castle. Shokuhou restores John's pen inside Index to combat Misaka's AAA to protect K&T, but Shokuhou is then targeted by Index or something else, regardless, and blows her whistle for help. The real Toma arrives and Shokuhou is wounded. It is perhaps karma for the betrayal, as hinted by what Shokuhou said about her being punished. Shokuhou blowing the whistle is Shokuhou calling back to reality. She let herself be consumed by her own self-interest and paid the consequences. She accepted reality when she moved on from being part of Toma's life, but now she has to learn to accept it again. She also accepts that this might be her last moment with the real Toma, and is ready to die in peace, knowing that the real Toma was there for her, no matter if he had no memories of Shokuhou at all. In conclusion, Shokuhou is one of the most complex female characters in the series, with her attitudes towards her clique, valuing each member as an individual and prioritizing them when she's in control. The relationship she has with her ability, and the struggle she has forming real human connections. She did find such a connection with Toma, but it was taken away from her. Then Shokuhou was at war with her own self-interest and knowing what's best for the boy she loves and moving on in her life. Sure, you can criticize the character for changing her mind or being written in a way that is forcing sympathy points, but I never viewed it that way at all. Her decision in New Testament 22R was consistent with her character, as she was always in conflict with her feelings ever since the Railgun manga with her attitude towards Dolly. And as for sympathy points, sure, she has somewhat of a melodramatic backstory if you simplify it enough, but then again, Kamachi never portrays Shokuhou as a completely benevolent person. She has an edge to her, which is one of the reasons why some fans may not like her, because she has a dark side inside that she battles with. She could easily devolve into an evil manipulator who uses those around her as tools as she forces herself into Toma's life for her own gain. But she's not like that at all. She's written in a way where you can question decisions she makes sometimes. She's good at heart, but she makes mistakes and controversial decisions. If Kamachi really wanted to make her a character solely for gaining sympathy points while playing the world's smallest violin, then Shokuhou would have no edge to her at all. It's like with Alistair's backstory. I mean, we can feel somewhat sorry for what happened to his daughter, but that doesn't mean he deserves sympathy because of all the bad things he has done in his life. Similar situation with Shokuhou, but not that extreme, of course. I mean, she's not done nearly as many fucked up things as Alistair has done. I personally love Shokuhou's morals. For me, they are some of the most intriguing in the series, as I really am into all her dynamics and conflicts of her character. Also, sorry this video went on for so long. I wouldn't have been able to say everything I wanted otherwise. So tell me, what do you think of Shokuhou? Is she one of the best characters in the franchise, or am I just falling for the waifu bait? Also, I would massively appreciate if you could share and like this video, as I worked really hard on it. As you can see, I spent a lot of time on it, more than usual, so please do that for me, that'd be great, thank you, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, that would be awesome. Alright, thanks for the support, and let me know what you think of Shokuhou. I'm ready for a war in the comments, yet again. Life is fun as a YouTuber. Anyway, until next time, bye bye.